My dream of running across the Uinta Mountains started when I was 12 years old. As a 12-year-old scout, we got dropped off in the Henry's Fork on the Wyoming side of the Uinta Mountains, and the goal was to finish over to the Roosevelt, Utah side, where we'd be picked up. That was 6 days of hiking, and since that time I've done that 7 times with different scouting groups. I was a scout leader and really enjoyed that experience. Sometimes, the drop-offs were in rain and snow. You could guarantee that there was going to be some storms up there, some lightning, maybe heavy rain and stuff there in the Kings Peak area. That was to be expected. It's a rough trail. It's strewn with rocks. It's shared by horses, and it's kind of rutted out a lot with the water that's run down the trail, and so it's kind of a treacherous trail when you think about running it. There's the potential for ankle sprains everywhere, every step, and the majority of this run is through what they call the primitive area, which means there's no motorized vehicles allowed in this area. It's remote. It's designed and planned to be primitive area. The hiking trail, or the run that I was planning to take, would take me across one of the passes. It was going to be Gunsight Pass, which is about 12,000 feet. It's kind of on your way to the Kings Peak area. You go to Gunsight Pass, and then on your right-hand side is our highest point in Utah that you can hike. I had several problems that I needed to solve in order to do this run. Just small, really tiny problems that I needed to figure out. Number one is elevation. There's simply no air to breathe once you get up there around 10,000 feet. And I don't know if you tried hiking at 10,000 feet. Try running at 10,000 feet. It becomes very, very difficult. Your heart rate just goes up really high, and there's not much you can do about it. The next problem that I was seeing is that it's a distance thing. Probably the longest run I've ever done before attempting something crazy like this was about 13 miles, which happens to be the half marathon distance that I've done in a couple of Ironman events. Well, what I was proposing to do was 40 miles. And most of that I planned on doing around a 10-minute mile pace. I know that seems optimistic now looking back on it, but that means at least 8+ hours of running. So figuring out how to do that, since you've never done that before, is kind of a small detail. The next issue was trail issues. The trail is really well defined most of the way up to Kings Peak, which is kind of like a freeway of sorts because so many people travel to Kings Peak. Everybody wants to climb the highest point in Utah. But once you go down into Painter Basin, which is below Kings Peak, and we go down the Uinta drainage, which is taking us onto the Utah side, there is not that much of a trail there. So I'm using this program called GIA GPS. It shows the Highline Trail, which is kind of a famous trail. The Highline Trail kind of follows the backbone of the Uinta mountain ranges. It's going up and down all the ridges and the highest places. We cross across that, but I kind of didn't want to take that trail because it takes me a little bit more elevation changes. There's a trail on some of the older maps that shows going down along the Uinta River. I kind of like to do that one, but what do you know when it hasn't, you've never been on that trail before. So the next issue is support issues. None, basically. The Henry's Fork is to Kings Peak is heavily traveled and traffic, but the last 30 miles from Gunsight Pass to my pickout point is like zero traffic, so I'm expecting not to find anybody there. The next thing is to note is that I'm 59 years old, which makes it so that, maybe I shouldn't be trying something quite this ambitious. In this area, there's no communications. You're completely off the grid, so cell phones aren't going to work. You can still get a GPS signal, which is really important because at least you know where you are. You just can't tell anybody else where you are. Small detail. One of the problems that you have is just making sure that you have adequate water to be drinking. So that's not as bad a problem because there's a lot of streams, there's a lot of springs along the way. You're going to be passing them almost every mile. Just having the proper filtration would kind of take care of that for you. Next issue, nutrition. You're going to be gone for a long time and maybe potentially the whole day, and possibly if things go badly, you might be even spending the night. So the question becomes, how much can you carry and still run? Something I needed to figure out. Food, my favorite food probably on longer runs is gummy bears. Has nice sugar, you can dissolve it. Usually I don't choke on it. Crackers, I'm really good at choking on. But crackers, salty things, granola bars, whatever I can stack in there, but not too heavy. And then the other issue is electrolytes. I know from my experience doing Ironman events that not having the proper salt intake, because you're sweating the whole time and you're losing all that salt out, you need to be thinking salt the whole way. Next issue is, what about potential injuries? What could happen when you're out there on the trail by yourself, 20 miles from no place? Yeah, lots of rocks. So potentially ankle sprains, injuries, cuts. Do I bring athletic tape, Band-Aids, sunscreens, mosquito repellent, and, what about inevitable blisters, when you're out there traveling that far? This is an ultra self-sponsored. And, with it being a COVID year and stuff like that, there's just not a whole lot of races out there to choose from. And so this kind of fits into that realm of, hey, I'm desperate, I need a race. So I'm creating my own. So I did think about shelter and stuff. What would I do if I got stranded up there? If I needed to spend the night, I wanted to carry maybe a space blanket with me, potential to build a fire, and survival. Being a scout leader all those years, I'm pretty comfortable with the idea that, I can put a lot of brush together, make a nice bed for me to nestle down into, throw the space blanket around to me, and freeze the whole night, but survive. So that was my plan, or at least that's what I'm thinking of. Transportation issues, you got to think about drop-off points, and when the heck are you going to come out the other side? There's no way to tell anybody where you're at or the progress that you're making. I did think about maybe tying things onto trees as I go by, just to say, hey, I made it this far. Maybe as the rescue crews kind of come looking for me. Last but not least, filming. I don't know, maybe there's a part of me that wants to film my own death, but it was important for me to be able to capture this on film, whatever I do. And so a GoPro was definitely something that I wanted to do and to bring into my future. So a big scary thing, the more I think about it, the more I go, oh my gosh, I got these butterflies going through my stomach and I need to run to the bathroom just thinking about this kind of a potential run. But yeah, a little scary. So anyway, there's my plan in a nutshell.